Poems to a Listener, readings and conversation with contemporary poets.
Isn't it true, though? We could ask who? Almost anybody. What's it all about? Yet asking, now wait for an answer, or getting one, part of one, suspect it, scoff, know it was false. It is, strangely, as though we already knew. It is as though we agreed, all agreed, never to say it, to lie about it, speak anything but the truth, knowing what we know.
Welcome to Poems to a Listener. I'm Henry Lyman, and in this half-hour program, we'll be visiting with poet William Bronk and listening to poems drawn mostly from his book, Life Supports, published by the Elizabeth Press and North Point Press. The poem we just heard suggests that all of us know something which we've agreed not to talk about, perhaps out of fear that it might contradict what we call our beliefs.
Although we call them beliefs, we don't necessarily really believe them. We force the beliefs.
We force beliefs on ourselves?
We force beliefs on ourselves. And we force them on other people in order that we shouldn't be standing alone, in order that we should have the confirmation of a generally accepted belief.
But it bothers you, doesn't it?
Yeah, I suppose in a sense it bothers me. I don't know how possible it is to not do it. Maybe that's the only way we can live. The duplicities of sense. Common sense is talking. It tells us what we have to believe is true, the obvious. We are born, we die, we perceive the shapes of things, and these are the shapes that anybody can see, granted goodwill, granted a will to be sane. Listen to it. Oh, listen to it, yes. Hold hard to clarity. Stay here. But Jesus God, this is a world where we are under compulsion not to stay with the sane, where besides the shape of things is shapelessness, random with atoms whose dance we please to be, all private, nothing and all, in a world where the sense we commune together to make is wrong.
What is common sense? Something we commune?
Yeah, it's a sense that we make in common that we compromise on, that we come up with, and that we can more or less accept and agree on.
But at the same time, according to the poem, we're under a compulsion not to stay with that. Something is drawing us away from that.
Yeah, something draws us away from it. But we are drawn back to it in order to get through the day, get through the night.
A little security.
A little security, yeah.
Do you think then that there's part of us which really wants to become shapeless in a way, or?
We are. The house that doesn't house. I have my own place and live there alone. In some ways we shape each other, perhaps. It's not the house that lives me, though something does. I think of whatever lives us as another house that we don't have to live in or even know about. It has space we can go to, not to stay, but go home again to the smaller rooms of our own, wondering at size, at immensity, where we sense the shelter and have no sense of wall, where there seems concern for us, though no one there, and we feel thankful for what we give, our temporal tininess, and begin to love ourselves as worthy deservers, as though we were ones who were loved, and go, bemused, back home, alone there.
There are two houses here,
Yeah.
one inside the other.
The one doesn't really have a physical existence, so there's no point in trying to locate it exactly.
But the physical house is the one we...
In the common sense way, we live in the physical house.
And there's something about it that we resent?
Yes. Don't you think that's true?
Yes, I find myself wanting to break out of the house.
Yeah, break out, yeah. Houses are always requiring making demands on us.
We have to hold them up.
We have to hold them up, yeah. They hold us up, but we have to hold them up too.
And if we let them fall?
And we become homeless. The annihilation of matter. The light, at least, was not to be dismissed. A hunked-up moon rode a starred sky. Those objects, what were those objects? Some trivial trees, something. Never mind. It was the light that mattered. As earlier, that afternoon, the wash of sun crossing the same place. But it was not the same in a different light. Would it be otherwise in a real world? Who could answer? Here it was always the light that mattered, and only the light. Once it had seemed the objects mattered. The light was to see them by. Examined, they yielded nothing, nothing real. They were for seeing the light in various ways. They gathered it, released it, held it in. In them, the light revealed itself, took shape. Objects are nothing. There's only the light. The light.
The poem moves right through objects to the light, implying that objects are in the way for you somehow, sometimes?
No, objects are not in the way, unless we regard them as ultimates.
Unless we regard them as ultimate.
They're not important in themselves, the objects aren't. What is important is what they can tell us about the light.
Which is only light?
I'm not going to tell you what the light is. You know. The emptiness of human being. Not long, but it isn't anyway determined by the interval. We mourn maybe the brevities as much as to say form were the enemy, the length of form. To hide from ourselves, of course from ourselves, who else? The emptiness of content, length couldn't fill, no matter how long it might be, forever if it were. No excuses. Evasions are what we try. Form as adversary, or, failing form, other divisions. Assertions by negatives. We are the not this, not that. The determined self makes be by partialness, sets out his space, says, here is truth, is his, says, less is all, defends, fades.
We use form to create a self, almost.
Yes, create a self which often is different from our secret concept of ourselves.
And that's what you mean by the determined self?
Yes, the person who is resolutely making something of himself.
How do you mean that?
Well, young people are always encouraged to, why don't you make something of yourself? You know, why don't you have a career and be a successful person and
make your mark on the world.
Make your mark on the world, yeah. We do that most often, I think, not in positive ways, but in negative ways. We set ourselves apart from each other. I'm not one of those people. I am so-and-so.
You're talking about identities.
Identity, yes. We give ourselves identities because basically we are nothing and nobody when it comes right down to it.
Nothing? Nobody?
Yeah. The story of mankind from earliest times to the present day. We are so set on making stories, asleep even, only the mind moving, lying intent to stroke whatever comes to it, awake while the body sleeps, identifying sounds with events, feeling with faces, picking out from the day's debris whatever will make do. Awake, our invention finds more room to move, sets up itself in 3 dimensions as if it were there, assigns us almost consistent roles to hold from day to day, necessitates a past we must have had, and a time to come where, even now, the story begins to be true. What may in fact go on, if indeed it does, has nothing at all to take from the story we tell.
Our view of our own lives is really just a story, then.
We make up a narrative, and we make up a narrative about what went before and a narrative about what is to come. Sometimes I feel that really nothing happened or nothing happens, that there hasn't been any history of mankind, that whatever is, was, and will be, and in that sense that there is no story.
Maybe that's why it's called his story.
Yeah. There are all sorts of histories.
Every nation writes its own, very much.
Yeah, and they say that after a war that history is always written by the winner. And we really believe these things. And what may in fact go on, if indeed it does, has nothing at all to take from the story we tell. That isn't what happened, probably.
But it's possible that something does go on.
It's possible. I'm not sure. I wouldn't say that it doesn't,
Right.
but that's probably what I believe. The puzzle there. It is, of course, not possible to faithfully translate what someone said in one language into another. The grasp is different, and language is grasp, not what we grope for, whatever that is. It is a puzzle. Interestingly enough, though, the recurrence of certain grammatical ideas from tongue to tongue as person, say, number, tense, suggests a validity of these, a closeness to what there is, or else a common limitation of men's minds. Which? It would help, even if we knew something of our mind, that we might distinguish that from what it tries to distinguish. Are they different things? Are they indeed things at all, as we say things, or are they just the hopeless improvisations of language, as we perhaps are, without an analogue in whatever is, as I believe there is? Something there. We have nothing to say of it.
Does language create us, improvise us?
It creates us, and it creates the world that we live in. It is grasp, and it is groping for something. It is groping for a reality that we would like to be able to put our hands on. But in our inability to really say what is there, we make statements in language, trying to say what is there and trying to say what we are. But in the absence of our really knowing what is there and our really knowing what we are, we make improvisations.
Which in turn can set us off from what is there, from...
Yes, I suppose it might do that. The inability. She wants me to say something pretty to her because we both know the unabettable bleak of the world. Make believe, she says, what harm? It may be so. I can't. I don't.
You don't want to relate to someone through just saying a nice word.
Yeah.
At least here, at this
Well,
moment.
sometimes we do, but it depends on partly on how much we respect the relationship, how much we want to make that relationship more real than pretense can make it, how much we want to respect and rely on the reality of the relationship, which is threatened by making believe. The wall, watching the curve of the long line of your back, desiring. I said in my mind that each of us is alone forever. Forever. We live with this.
Utter solitude.
Yes, yes. Ultimate, utter solitude.
Is it possible to relate it all?
We do it all the time, and sometimes it works, sometimes it lasts. But I think probably more often that it disintegrates on its own pretense, its own make-believe. But not always, no, not always. The world. I thought that you were an anchor in the drift of the world. But no, there isn't an anchor anywhere. There isn't an anchor in the drift of the world. Oh no, I thought you were. Oh no, the drift of the world.
The person who's being addressed was once an anchor or something to hold you?
Yes, yeah. Was taken for an anchor.
And somehow we can't do that?
We do make anchors out of people, but it frequently doesn't work. There isn't an anchor in the drift of the world.
Only the drift?
Yeah. The outer becoming inner. Sometimes I could go in anywhere, not to see the stars, not to be as we are always, not only under them, but in them. The outer spaces push against us. All their vastness is apart. They crowd us. They become our world. I could go hide like Adam in his garden. How would it matter? No. We are in the stars. Not for us ever any familiar and definite world.
We are in the stars. How do you mean that?
What we call the universe.
Which is endless.
Which I think is endless, and I am frightened by that kind of immensity.
Sometimes.
And I could try to hide from it by going into the house, as Adam tried to hide in the garden, probably under the trees or something or other. But how would it matter? No, we are in the stars. It's something that we cannot hide from, something which is unavoidable.
Are you always afraid of it?
Oh, fear is not the only thing that I feel about it, no. I feel elation and delight. But it puts a kind of emotional demand on us which sometimes we're not capable of. We would feel more comfortable and more at home in a familiar and definite world.
Right, which would be our shelter. Right.
Which is our shelter, yes, the place where we can hide from a reality that we are simply not up to, the fact that we are in the stars. Right here, we don't have to go to outer space to be in the stars. Right now, right sitting in this room, we are in the midst of an enormous universe. The deprived. Deprivation is to be driven as Eve and her Adam were from the garden, amazed how far the unexpected world goes. The opening out. It is hard to live here.
There is a sense of amazement once we leave the shelter.
The opening out, yeah.
When we can. But it's rare, isn't it? When people do open out in that sense.
I don't know, is it? I wonder how maybe people do open out privately more than we think they do. Try something new. Not much, but something, yeah. Changes of some sort do come about. We open out that way.
And what way would that be? For example?
For example, a fair face. Look at me. In so doing, the glass of you, edge on before, is turned to show as though behind the face a truth we believe but almost disbelieve, like the sight from a drab room's window of late sun on a drab world. Strange the elements that go to make a face could so arrange themselves to form this pure transparency. One thinks of an opposite phenomenon in the natural world, of how in an emptiness where there is nothing, or nothing anyway we see, a tiny thickening appears, a slight cloudiness which then attracts other particles to itself, or grows somehow to bulk and opacity which is dear to us, or fearful, or sometimes both. But you are nothing, or only as a glass, as air, an opening in, say, a woods, a thicket of trees, from out of which we peer at this fair landscape. There is light there from a warm sun, and distance has erased away irrelevance. All is composed, serene, and we desire this. Look at me. Oh, look at me. At me.
We've been visiting with poet William Bronk and listening to poems drawn mostly from his book Life Supports, published by the Elizabeth Press and North Point Press. I'm Henry Lyman. Thanks for being with us.
Poems to a Listener was produced by Henry Lyman in cooperation with WFCR Amherst, Massachusetts. Financial assistance was provided by the Massachusetts Council on the Arts and Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Massachusetts Foundation for Humanities and Public Policy.